Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. How's it going?
Tony, we finally got a chance to watch the full Texas-Arizona State Peach Bowl game. It was one that was happening as we were busy covering the Rose Bowl, and I was sitting down in the photo room at the Rose Bowl and looked up at the screen, and they had like the stat broadcast thing up there with, the games on there, and I can see the score, but they also had the team stats, and I'm going, it's 17-5, but Arizona State's winning like every possible statistical metric by a huge amount. None of this makes any sense. And now that I've watched the game, it makes a little more sense, but that was still one of the weirder games, like consequential games that I can remember watching.
Yeah, there's some crazy ebbs and flows, and Cam Scadaboo, the Arizona State running back, rushes for 143 yards on 30 attempts, but was pretty shut down in the first half. They contained him pretty well. I was really impressed with Arizona State quarterback Sam Leavitt and how he had to just escape constantly because Texas was getting pressure. That's first point for me. Texas was getting pressure with four guys routinely in this one. And it was outside, it was inside. And then when they'd get into a passing situation like third and long, then they'd bring in a fifth guy or a sixth guy. And they'd also bring in four and then spy him with one or with two. So they did a really good job against him. And they were concerned about his mobility, which they should have been. And I thought they handled it pretty well. He threw for 222 yards on 46 attempts, 24 of 46 with an interception. They sacked him 3 times. But credit to that guy for getting away as much as he did, because a lesser quarterback with that offensive line was going to get routinely murdered.
Yeah, that was like the most dangerous game, but in football form, where it was that was a bunch of dudes going out in the jungle to hunt a human for sport. That was basically what that pass rush looked like the entire day. I will just run through all of the names because I'm like, I had at various points written down like, oh, this guy made a really nice play. Oh, this guy made a really nice play. So here is the entirety of the Texas defensive line as far as you need to know. Baron Sorrell, number 88, very active. Vernon Broughton, number 45. He's on the interior. He was just blowing stuff up constantly. Alfred Collins, number 95, swallowed up a 4th-and-1 run hole. Ethan Burke, number 91, coming off the edge. So much pressure off the edge is the exact sentence in my notes. Trey Moore, number 8, sack on 4th down. Colin Simmons, number 11, off the edge, just torching the right tackle with speed. He flushed the quarterback into one sack, got another sack himself later. He was just running for his life literally the entire game. And I hope that the Arizona State plane home from that game had 2 big ice baths, one for Cam Scadaboo and one for the quarterback, because that looked like 2 guys who were probably going to need a little Advil on the airplane home. That did not look like at all a good time. And it was remarkable how effective they were, just kind of making stuff up and just sort of winging it half the time. I mean, it took a halfback pass for a long touchdown or a long gain. Was it a touchdown? They got a touchdown that one, yeah.
Not a great pass either.
Not a great pass, no, but it was a great call in a 4th down situation. So, really, really sucked I think it was Taft, the safety, who got kind of sucked up on that one on a, 4th and 2 toss play. You're assuming, yeah, it's a toss play. They're going to run it with the running back. So, but even with all that said, this is the second game in a row where it's been a college football playoff opponent. First Clemson, now ASU. They're down in the goal line, and it's, 1st and goal at the 2-yard line. And you're like, I know what the final score of this game was. How do they not get in? It's like 4 cracks from the 2, and they run, and they run, and they run, and they run. It's like, nope. Turnover and downs. And it is amazing how effective that Texas defensive line is in the run and the pass.
Yeah, Arizona State scored touchdowns on 2 of their 6 red zone opportunities, and Texas does a good job of creating negative plays or just blowing stuff up, and then now you've got to adjust. And talking about Sam Leavitt getting chased all over the place, he still was only sacked 3 times, but only lost 9 yards on those sacks, and that was that was pretty impressive. Just he did a great job of staying alive but Texas was just unrelenting. I do think, though, they kind of wore down in the second half, Texas did, and you can understand they've 97 plays of total of offense, 97 offensive snaps for Arizona State in this game. You're going to start to wear down in the third and fourth quarter. And you saw Cam Scadaboo start to get some yards. He rushed for 143 yards on 30 carries, takes a break to vomit. Just looks like he's completely beaten, and then gets up and he's like, just dusts off the shoulders. And, I'm watching this, I'm thinking that guy is going to be a pain in the ass as a foreman in his next life, because he's just going to drive everybody crazy. Like, we are working 84 hours this week. I don't care what kind of plans you have for your family. We're going to keep going at it. And they kept, Texas and Cam Scadaboo, man, that's I would like to see more of that.
Yeah, that was an entertaining game for sure. And this was such an eventful game all around, and in such just like weird, unpredictable ways. We normally save the special teams for the last. It's like we talk about the offense, we talk about the defense, and we'll get to the special teams at the end. We got to talk about Texas's special teams, because it's like, how was Texas's special teams in this game? And the answer is eventful. They had a punt block drawn up that a guy came clean, and all he had to do was not, he had to just either tip the football or not run into the kicker, and he had a clean run straight up the gut. And it was like, well, this is the most blocked punt in the history of blocked punts, and he somehow missed it and hit the kicker and gave Arizona State a first down. Then they blocked a field goal at one point later. They had a punt return touchdown, so those are 2 pluses. Bert Auburn, the kicker, missed a field goal wide right that they had, more or less set up for him. And then he had a game-winning kick where they had centered it in the middle of the field. It was less than 40 yards. He hadn't missed from less than 40 yards all season, and he doinked it off the left, off right. First miss from inside 40 yards all season. That is one of the most eventful special teams games I've ever seen. And that, Tony, gets me to Texas's special teams coordinator, because I heard the name on the broadcast, and I guess it was just not a name they had said on either of the 2 games beforehand. And it took me a second, and it was like, Jeff Banks. Does Texas special teams coordinator Jeff Banks ring any kind of bells to you in terms of quirky college football stories in recent years?
It does not. No, okay. Explain.
Does the name Pole Assassin ring any bells with you?
In fact, it will always ring some bells for me.
Okay, so Pole Assassin is Texas special teams coordinator's Jeff Banks' wife now. Pole Assassin was her professional name. I don't believe that's what's on her driver's license, but we don't need to get into what her profession was to have the name Pole Assassin, Pole. She's not a political pollster. She had a monkey that bit a child on Halloween a couple of years ago. It was one of those those crazy college football stories that are like, this story's not going to get any wilder, and then it does 3 more times. Anyway, that was the Jeff Banks story. You can treat yourself to that. After this, to finish the show, afterwards, look it up. It is, I laughed, I cried. It was better than Cats. That is that story. But anyway, so that's Texas special teams coordinator Jeff Banks, and his eventful life and his eventful game in the Peach Bowl.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you mentioned Ethan Burke with the blocked field goal as well. Mm-hmm. A first in my lifetime of seeing a blocked field goal that bounces on the ground and then goes through the goalposts, which I've never seen before. Don't ever expect to see again. So as you said, very eventful. With Bolden as the punt returner, Silas Bolden. Man, he's dangerous. You got to be careful with that guy. Ohio State has to be ready for him to return, and when they have an opportunity to make a tackle, like Arizona State did on this one, on their punt return touchdown, they got a hand on him, but he went right by. So when you have that opportunity, you've got to make sure that you tackle him. And I'll just say, you can say the same thing for Matthew Golden, wide receiver, who is their deep threat when Quinn Ewers is actually throwing the ball on time. And that takes me to my next point, Tom, is that we saw some deep shots in this one. How many of those were in stride? Not many. There was a lot of waiting for Quinn Ewers for his passes to get to the receiver. That allowed the defensive backs to get there. That allowed for an interception to happen. And to me, there wasn't enough. The timing was off. You're waiting for the passes to come down. And so I think that's an issue that we've seen an up and down Quinn Ewers to this point. I thought he played relatively well in this one, 20 for 32 or 20 for 30, 322 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. But the thing that I noticed most is those deep shots just they weren't on time and they were lacking in terms of just being there, and the receivers had to slow down, wait for them, and allow the defense to come back.
Well, I think if you look at the Ohio State quarterbacking position the last couple of years, you see some of the similar stuff. Like it felt in 2023 like Kyle McCord was never quite stepping into his deep throws and was a little late or a little short on a lot of them. And there were a couple this year where it was like, go ahead, Will Howard, and try and overthrow Jeremiah Smith because you're constantly underthrowing him and he has to kind of wait for it and then he gets tackled when he's open. And it feels like that has kind of gotten resolved and Howard is now kind of hitting guys more in stride. So maybe that's something that can get fixed before the next round of the playoff. But, it's something that they have brought up on broadcast. I think they brought it up on the Clemson game that he's been a little, underthrowing guys on deep balls or a little late on deep balls. And that's sort of just been a recurring theme all season. And you've definitely seen it. And that's one of those things where if you have an opportunity to hit a big play, you got to hit a big play because this is not a Texas offense that is likely going to be able to run for 290 whatever yards like they did against Clemson because they didn't come close to that in this game. And they didn't come close to that against Georgia. And Ohio State's defense is much more in the Georgia or Arizona State class in terms of run defense this year than they are in terms of Clemson. So you're going to have to hit those big plays. One thing that I would certainly write down is when there is a big play, not necessarily a downfield play, but a big play, you can pretty much just write in ink, this ball is going to one of two people. One of them is Matthew Golden, who's number 2. You mentioned him earlier. He is their leading wide receiver, but he is just, if there is a big moment in the game, he is going to be Quinn Ewers' first or second read, almost guaranteed. He had a big play on an RPO on the very first play of the game. He drew a pass interference call in the second quarter on a big shot downfield where it was a little underthrown and the defensive back basically ran through the receiver. There was a 4th and 2, huge play coming up sort of later in the game. And it's 4th and 2. You're like, okay, are they going to try and run it? Nope. They're going to throw it to Matthew Golden. I think that was the one where the sideline reporter said, Sark said something like, we can't be doing dangerous stuff like that on 4th down. Like it was like what are you doing? But that's where the ball went. There was a 3rd and 10. Arizona State goes cover 0. Golden makes a great catch down the sideline. First play of the final drive of regulation, hits Golden on the sideline. 4th and 13 in the bottom of the first overtime. 4th and 13, game on the line. You need a touchdown. Who do they go to? They go to Golden. 2-point conversion in the second overtime. Who do you go to? You go to Golden. Like he is the first read, the second read, and sometimes the third read, it feels like, for Quinn Ewers. He's the guy, number 2. He is the guy you've got to watch in the passing game. They have other receivers. They have other talented receivers. Isaiah Bond was, I think, back for this one. Ryan Wingo, you saw a little bit in this one. But, Golden is the guy who you have to really like. You got to make sure you know where he is in the field. I was also sort of related. The other guy who I always assume is going to be the target in those situations is Gunnar Helm, the tight end, number 85. He had a really quiet game. His first catch of the game came with less than 4 minutes to go. But again, it's 4 minutes to go in the game. I think it was a tie game at that point, and it was a crucial 3rd down play, and boom, they hit him for a 1st down. And then he had scored the touchdown on the first play of the second overtime. So those are the 2 guys, if you're an Ohio State fan, kind of watching, like, who are they going to be looking for in the passing game? I would say Matthew Golden, number 2, is the top guy you need to keep an eye on. Gunnar Helm, number 85, the tight end, is definitely the second guy who, if Ohio State controls those 2 guys, they're going to make Texas win kind of left-handed.
Well, and Isaiah Bond got a couple of deep shots in this one, didn't catch either of them. I don't believe he played against Clemson, has, as you said, been battling injuries, has just 3 catches for 49 yards and over Texas's last 5 games. But the moment you stop worrying about him, he could have an Evan Stewart kind of game against you like Evan Stewart did in October against Ohio State. So certainly this will be as good a group, or maybe, I don't know, how would you compare this to Oregon? Because you don't have the slot receiver that you do to worry about with Tez Johnson, even though, like Silas Bolton, you do have to worry about him. But the outside receivers, I think, with Matthew Golden, maybe him alone, he is a bigger concern than anybody outside Ohio State has faced this season. As I try to think, like, who is the best outside receiver that they've faced this year, and really there aren't a lot of names. I mean,
yeah. Evan Stewart from Oregon, he had 149 yards, I think, against Ohio State the first time, and then got hurt before the Rose Bowl. That was one of the things that really kind of swung the Rose Bowl. I think, Ohio State was going to win that game no matter what, based on the way they played. But Evan Stewart might have, it might have been 34-7 in the second quarter instead of 34-0. But yeah, it was that they haven't played a ton of great outside receivers. Golden is definitely going to be in that conversation. And Gunnar Helm, I mean, they've played some great tight ends this year. Terrence Ferguson for Oregon. They played, obviously, Tyler Warren from Penn State. So this is not a brand new thing, having to stop a good tight end. But, Gunnar Helm is in the same conversation with those guys in terms of some of the best tight ends in the country.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about the Texas offensive line, which good luck figuring out the Texas offensive line, because it is just a constant. It's like one of those puzzles where it's, you're trying to solve it, and then like you've got 30 seconds, and if you don't solve it, like then the puzzle changes again. It's like Texas' offensive line is just a constantly changing puzzle. Jake Majors, the center, was back, and then the right tackle Cameron Williams was out, but he was available if needed. So Trevor Gooseby, who was in at left tackle at one point in the Georgia game, and then played right tackle in the Clemson game, he was back at right tackle in this one. Cameron Williams was supposedly available in an emergency. Sounds like he's been practicing, so sounds like he's likely going to be back for the Cotton Bowl. But, the offensive line has just been a constant shuffle, and then Kelvin Banks goes down with a left leg injury at one point, and then he came back out there later. It's just kind of like constantly in flux. And I would love to have a better feel for what this offensive line is, but we've never actually seen the five guys. I had posted sort of my long form thoughts on Texas through these three games on our message board, and someone commented on the inconsistency of Texas kicker Bert Auburn, and said, like, who would have thought that going into this game that Ohio State fans would feel more confident about their kicker than the opponent, because Jaden Fielding had missed a couple field goals against Michigan and has looked better since then. He had a solid Rose Bowl. But it's the same thing with Ohio State. Like, who would have felt like the Ohio State offensive line might be a slightly more settled, at least not necessarily better, but at least like more settled situation than their opponent in this game. Ohio State is currently shuffling three different guys between the two guard positions, and it still feels like I have a higher degree of confidence in who I'm going to see snap to snap out there for Ohio State on offensive line than Texas. And it wasn't like Texas had a terrible offensive line performance. They protected Ewers pretty well. He really didn't have a ton of pressure. They didn't run the ball great, but they ran the ball okay. Like they ended up with like 50 yards rushing, but it felt like they were getting 4 yards as often as not. So it wasn't like they were getting swallowed up in the backfield constantly. It was just again, like kind of a weird, uneven performance where I still, after watching three games, don't really truly feel like I've completely got my hands around what that Texas offensive line is going to look like against Ohio State. I thought that first game, when I saw Cameron Williams at right tackle, I was like, he did not have a good game against Georgia. And it was like, oh boy, that might look real bad against Ohio State. They could put Gooseby in there. Gooseby's looked fine. So maybe he's the answer. I don't really know. And Tony, one last thought. As I was looking up just what class some of these guys were in, I was looking through the Texas offensive linemen on the roster. Did you know that there is the son of a former Major League Baseball player who is a backup offensive lineman for Texas? Do you know who it is?
Give me a last name.
Well, that'll be pretty obvious.
Strawberry?
If I tell you it is a former Texas baseball player who played for the Cubs.
Is it Palmero or Sosa?
Brooks Kieschnick Jr.
Oh, gee
So
whiz.
feels like he should be playing both on offense and defense, if you know what I mean. But hey, it's yeah, I saw that and I thought this might be one of these real sure signs that we are getting old. That Brooks Kieschnick has a kid in college playing football for the Longhorns.
That is a very, very deep pull. That is a name I have not heard in a long time. But you're right. You never know what you're going to get from this offensive line in terms of, on any given snap, it seems like one of them's going down, has to come out, or they've just been out. I'm glad you were keeping track of it because I was like, I can't even do it anymore. Like, I'll chart a bunch of stuff. I can't chart who keeps going in and who keeps going out on this offensive line. All I know is they've got like 7 guys that they trust, and they're playing okay. And Arizona State did they didn't get after Quinn Ewers as much as certainly they had hoped, even though they did sack him 3 times. And I think if Ohio State gets 3 sacks, and this one, that might be enough, depending on where they are. And, is it a 3rd down or is it a 1st down? So, overall, the offensive line, I'm expecting them all to be ready to go and for it to just be those 5. And then we'll finally figure out, hey, how good is this 5? Because this will be our first time actually seeing them overall. Just looking through some of my notes as well. I was watching this, sort of watching this live in the press box. So Texas goes up by 15, I think late in the 3rd, early in the 4th. And rather than go for 2 to make it a 17-point game, Steve Sarkisian goes for 1 to make it a 16-point game. And I don't know who I was talking with. It's like, yeah, it's not like that's going to actually matter. And then it mattered because Arizona State scored 2 touchdowns and got their 2 2-point conversions. So I thought that was interesting that you had an opportunity, Steve Sarkisian had an opportunity to make it a 17-point game, and thought, what are the chances that Arizona State scores 2 touchdowns, gets 2 2-point conversions, and we don't do anything in the interim? Well, that's exactly what happened, and it nearly cost Texas this game. And I'll toss it over to you before we start talking about a questionable targeting call, Tom.
Yeah, that's one of those times when I understand the thinking, and generally the offensive coaches, and really these are 2 relatively young offensive coaches who are probably more likely to be a little more aggressive in those situations. I get it. That you put the onus on the other team to have to get 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions. They haven't scored a touchdown to that point of the game yet, so I get it. You put the onus on them, but they did it to their credit. They did it. Part of that, I do want to shout this out real quick. I don't remember where exactly in the game this was. The single ballsiest fake punt I have ever seen.
Amazing.
They run a fake punt on 4th and 9 from their own 23. That was Arizona State, with a true freshman punter throwing to a defensive tackle, and it works. That's one of those, like, that's the universe telling you you're doing something so cool that we're going to make this happen. Because there's like 4th and 9, K, at your own 23, K, true freshman punter, K, throwing the pass, to who? A defensive tackle. That's like they in the Army-Navy game, Navy ran a direct snap to like a 95-pound nose tackle, and he ran for like 40 yards against Army. And it was like, at that moment, you're like, the Army has no chance to win this game. Like, that was way too cool. There's no chance. That was kind of the that Arizona State fake punt. We're not talking about Arizona State, so I had no other place to shout that out. But man, I thought that deserved a little bit of a hat tip, because that was awesome.
Yeah, it was, and there are some swings in this one, and you're kind of going for it all, and knowing that you had to, especially if you're Arizona State. I can't say enough about Arizona State, how well they did coming back, but Texas just kept taking it to them, and I do want to address the targeting call, because I don't know what targeting is, Tom. So I know there was a moment in this where Michael Taft hits an Arizona State guy, would have given them a 1st down. I believe this is the last drive of regulation, and it would have extended the drive, given Arizona State an opportunity to pick up a 1st down. And I thought it was funny because they went to the rules official, the broadcast rules official, and his comment is, "I would not be surprised if this is rule targeting." You know why he says that? Because he said it. He's been contradicted too many times, saying, "I think this is targeting," and then to have the rules official say, like, "Nope," the replay official say, "No, this is not targeting." So he's been burned enough times. We see it all the time where the broadcast officials like, "Yeah, this is targeting," or "No, it's not," and then the exact opposite happens. I don't know how you can have such an impactful rule, and you're like the rules official who knows what the rule is says, "I would not be surprised if this is targeting." Like, either it is targeting or it isn't. I've seen worse or lesser hits be called targeting, and so it's just interesting that nobody knows what is targeting, and everybody is convinced that they also do know what targeting is.
Well, I tried to look up if there was like a pool reporter who got a chance to talk to the officials after this game to get clarification on why it wasn't targeting, and I didn't find that, but I did find an article where Kenny Dillingham, the Arizona State coach, his quote about that was, "I guess I don't know what targeting is," basically, more or less. It's so, you know, without getting into a long relitigation of this call, like, what's the point of the rule? The point of the rule is to avoid head-to-head contact that causes injury to players, and whether immediate concussion injury or long-term CTE type injury. And you had a head-to-head hit on what was the official said was a defenseless player that caused a head injury to him where he was down on the field. It's like it goes back to like the 2022 Peach Bowl and the hit on Marvin Harrison Jr., where it's like the guy launches and hits him head to head and he gives him a concussion, and it's like, this is the exact kind of hit this rule was designed to avoid. So if there is some part of this rule that rules this a legal hit, like, then it's a poorly written rule and you should rewrite the rule. Like, it, and I am a long-standing member of don't let the officials decide the game, but also, like, if you have a hit like that, like, yeah, that was targeting. Pretty much everyone agrees that was targeting. So that was one. If I was an Arizona State fan, I would not be a real big fan of that non-call, because that could have potentially swung the game, because that was kind of at midfield with about a minute left, 15 yards. You move it down to the 35. You got a minute or so to go. You don't have to give Texas another crack at it in regulation. And Arizona State, even after that, got Texas to a 4th and 13 in overtime. So it's not like Arizona State didn't have another great, easy chance to win the game and give it away. So this is not, the refs stole this game from Arizona State or anything like that. But yeah, that's one that, just based on what the rules are designed to do, should have been a penalty. Let's talk a little bit about the safeties other than that one hit. Michael Taft, who was the guy who did have that hit, he was down in the box in the run fit very early, a whole bunch. They were like very clearly not respecting that Arizona State pass game, because I think they could tell they're not going to have time to throw the ball. They're not going to have time to step back there. So they're going to have to try and run it to get it, to move it at all. You saw Andrew Makuba, the other safety. He was going downhill very hard to stop the run several times. He also had the game-clinching interception in double OT. So yeah, I come away pretty impressed with the Texas safeties. And we've talked about Jahdae Barron, Thorpe Award winner. They went right at Jahdae Barron in the first couple plays. There was one run where he didn't look super comfortable, and then there was a really tough pass on him for a short gain, and then you really didn't see anything else against him pretty much all game. He, again, had a big stop on a corner blitz in the fourth corner. We've seen a bunch of those out of Peter Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator. So, yeah, and he did get called for pass interference in the end zone in the fourth quarter, and it was not a cheapie. He got his money's worth on that one.
Yeah, he certainly did. And, Taff had 2 pass breakups. You mentioned the game-clinching interception from Makuba. He also had 8 tackles. Still waiting to see Texas against an elite passing attack. We talk about the best passing games in terms of yards per attempt that they've faced this year. You're talking Vanderbilt and Florida, that kind of thing. So it's like, who have you really faced? And Florida with their 3rd-string quarterback at the time. So still some things to learn about Texas's pass defense. one of the interesting things in this one for me is Arizona State had 9 tackles for loss. They were getting into the backfield, and it wasn't just they had the 3 sacks, but you had like I think 10 guys that had a tackle for loss in this one, at least a half a tackle for loss. So they were penetrating against that random number generator offensive line that Texas has at times. So they were getting into the backfield, creating some havoc, and I think if Arizona State can do that, then it would led me to believe that Ohio State could do that. But again, let's see the offensive line as it was meant to be, as it was designed to be, and then maybe things will be different. But if they're makeshifting again, that's not going to go well for Texas as Ohio State gets in there and starts penetrating and doing those sorts of things and really creating some havoc. One of the last things for me, I thought Arizona State went after Malik Muhammad a little bit in this one, and there were some successful plays. He did have a hell of a pass breakup on a diving play that was impressive, but they went after him a little bit. Wasn't a lot. There weren't a lot of downfield shots early on. They were just Arizona State was throwing some short stuff throughout maybe the first half as they were just trying to control, just stay ahead of the chains and not look too far downfield. And I don't know how much Texas was even going to allow that to get them downfield. But overall, you saw Sam Levitt throw a bunch of times for not a huge amount of yards for the number of attempts he had, 222 yards on 46 attempts. Like, you're going to take that generally every single game. But, you had the long 62-yarder to Cam Scadaboo. Just some random, fluky plays on Arizona State's part that made these numbers look like they did, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that ASU wasn't throwing the ball downfield in the first half especially was they couldn't give him time to throw downfield. I mean, there were times when they were trying to take shots, but they had to go max protect and have like a 2-man route. And then if you're running a 2-man route, and that's real easy to cover. So, and they were playing without their leading wide receiver, which is probably part of that conversation as well. And that, I think, I looked up ASU, they were top 20 nationally in yards per attempt passing this year, the 8.4, but I mean, they looked totally helpless because of A, the pressure, and B, they were missing their best receiver, and they dropped a lot of passes. There were a bunch of drops that probably would have been decent gains, but the receiving core there is just not great. So yeah, that was, I think, worth noting at least. A couple quick notes on Texas. Jaden Blue and Quintravion Wisner, they are 1-2 in the SEC in terms of receptions by running backs. So if you're an Ohio State fan, keep an eye on that. You're going to see a lot of, Texas throws a lot of screens, a lot of short and mid-range stuff. So the running backs being a big part of that passing game, not really a big surprise. We talked briefly about Quinn Ewers throwing downfield and kind of underthrowing it, and he had one that he threw downfield it was pretty late in the game, where it was open for a second. I think it was Golden was open for a second, but he hung it up there, and it turned into the corner intercepted it, and the safety came over and absolutely annihilated the receiver. So it was like, boy, that turned one good outcome into 2 bad outcomes because you hung the ball up there. But he doesn't put it on a line all that often. It feels like, and I don't know, I've said before, going back to high school, his mechanics have always just kind of given me the heebie-jeebies, and it's like, I don't know, like, he's got great natural arm talent, but I think it could be better if some of the mechanic stuff got cleaned up a little bit, but that has not happened so far. I did like they talked a bunch about the fact that the Texas offensive line outweighed the Arizona State defensive line by about 60 pounds a guy across the line. It'll be a little closer in this game. Ohio State has some 300-pound defensive tackles, but Arizona State was kind of a little small, small, quicker guys, where that worked sometimes. What was amazing to me was you're outmanning these guys by 60 pounds across the deck, and they still couldn't run the ball. That was the long run all day long. Long run of the game was 7 yards. That was like, that's like, I think, officially a concern. And the first question that Ryan Day got on one of the press conferences was from a Texas reporter who was basically saying, like, so Texas can't run the ball at all. And it was kind of like, is that really true? I mean, I feel like I've seen them run it this year, but the last three games, they have not been able to run the ball at all, which, with a quarterback like Quinn Ewers, who is, he can move. He had a touchdown run in this one. He had I think a first down scramble on this one. But it's just, you never see him in design runs. So he's not in the run. He's not really a part of the run game. He can sort of extend some plays with his legs, but he's not going to run for 150 yards on you. That feels like, if you're going to get one dimensional, I think that's going to be a challenge for them to move the ball up and down the field consistently. And, Ohio State has not given up explosive plays really at all this year. So we haven't seen Texas put up a ton of explosive plays on offense other than running the ball against Clemson, who's got a terrible, terrible run defense. So, and the last thing on the ground game piece of it, Jaden Blue, who we heard, every time we're watching, we're like, wow, it's amazing this guy doesn't play more. And then someone at one point on the broadcast said, well, he's had problem with fumbles. He got hit on one of these. He only had like 4 or 5 touches. He got hit and fumbled the ball on this one and went out of bounds. And it's like, oh, there it is. That's why he doesn't get more touches.
Yeah, Quintavious Wisner, 18 carries, 45 yards in this one. 6 of his 18 carries went for a loss or no gain. He had 2 of 0 and 4 rushes that went for negative yards. You mentioned his long of just 7 yards. Texas does well with the RPO. That was the first big play out of the gate, as you said earlier in the show, to Matthew Golden, and it was a big gainer. But the thing is, if the R is not a threat, then the P and the O can be defended. And so if Ohio State's able to just defend the R with their front forward and a linebacker or something like that, they've done really well against the RPO since the Oregon game. They've been able to handle it well. They've got the athleticism and a discipline at linebacker to do that, and the tackling at safety. There was a missed tackle on that big play to Golden that led to the run after catch. So Ohio State better equipped to handle those things. I'm not saying they are going to handle it, but they've done well against it so far. But Ewers has some patience with the RPO. If it's not right there just yet, he'll wait after he's made his decision for the receiver to clear the guy he's reading. So overall, Tom, I think this was, I don't know if we learned more about Arizona State or Texas in this one, but credit Texas for blowing a lead and recapturing the momentum. And they did against Clemson as well. So this is a team that I wrote down, the defense was a little shell-shocked towards the end of the game, but they bounced back. They had an interception to clinch it. So I don't see them being a team that just folds. They might lose, but they're going to keep fighting the entire way.
Well, and they were talking on the broadcast about the pattern that a lot of these Texas games have followed this season, which is fast start and then kind of in the doldrums for a while, and the game gets close, and then they sort of pull away and win in the end, and unless they lose in the end. And this is one where they scored 2 touchdowns in like a minute. It went from 3-0 Arizona State to 14-3 Texas in the blink of an eye, because they scored on I think a 2-play drive, and then forced a 3 and out, and then returned the punt for a touchdown. And it was just boom, boom, boom. And it was like, wow. What, even watching it, knowing the score in my head, I'm going, they must have beat them by 50. No, they went to double overtime. And I think one thing we should mention here is people have been talking about, boy, Texas had 90 whatever plays on defense, and they're going to be worn down. They held up reasonably well. I mean, they were obviously getting worn down at the end of the game, but they play so much depth, especially on that defensive line, that they held up over 97 plays way better than you would think. I mean, Ohio State, I go back to last year, the 2023 Notre Dame game, where Ohio State didn't rotate their defensive ends at all, and they just played 2 defensive ends the whole game. And it was Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, and they played 50 whatever snaps, and they were really getting worn down at the end of the game. Okay, now add 40 more snaps to that. So that's you've really got to be able to lean on your depth, and Texas does have some really, really good depth on that defensive line. So I think that's going to probably mitigate some of the, battered and bruised and worn down from a very, very long, strenuous game. the last thing, Tony, they kept talking about how Cam Scadaboo hadn't had to play in the fourth quarter going back to before the Arizona game, and how this was really strenuous on him to have to play 4 quarters and beyond. Ohio State hasn't really had to play a 4-quarter game since Michigan. So, if this does turn into a 4-quarter game, yeah, their guys are more rested than Texas's, but Texas has had to play a 4-quarter game. Texas had to play 2 4-quarter games since Ohio State last had to. So, you can choose your own adventure in terms of who that would favor.
Yeah, is it better to not play in the to not have a bye and keep playing? Is kind of that same argument. Do you want to stay fresh? Do you want to have that experience of playing? Do you want to have that experience of playing a 4-quarter game, or do you want to have be fresh from not having to play that? I think it just depends on the situation, depends on the team, depends on the preparation, and depends on the matchups. And then, of course, you assign your predetermined thought process to that outcome and say, "Aha, told you." So there you go. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. We'd appreciate that. Hit the bell to be notified. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so. And, of course, continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month, just $4.99. Sign up. Check us out there on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, where we are talking about the Cotton Bowl and everything else. Transfer portal, recruiting, team stuff. There's a lot going on, more than just the Cotton Bowl, but especially the Cotton Bowl. So find us there. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.